Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Drillinger, and I'm the chairman of the 10 Mile River Scout Museum. This museum is located at the headquarters camp of 10 Mile River Scout Camp, which is in Narrowsburg, New York. The museum is hosting a series of informative talks, which we hope will be of interest to the general public, as well as the Scouts and Scouters. Owing to the terrible pandemic that we're all suffering through, our series of talks is being given virtually, and we're thrilled that you're all here to join us. Ten Mile River Scout Camp is located on a 12,000-acre reservation. The camp first opened in 1927 and was made possible by prominent New Yorkers led by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The TMR Scout Museum was started in 1997 and is dedicated to preserving the history and artifacts of the 10 Mile River Scout camps and the local area. Unfortunately, due to COVID, the museum is currently closed, but you can take a virtual tour of the museum at the museum's website, tmrmuseum.org/historian. If you have any questions, feel free to call the museum at the number on the screen. We are presenting these webinars using a platform called GoToWebinar. Somewhere on your screen, you should have a control box that looks something like this with a section marked questions. This is where you can type any questions you may have during the presentation. And when the presentation is over, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can get to. After today's program, there'll be a brief survey, and we'd appreciate it if you'd answer the few questions there. Additionally, there'll be a video of this complete program available on our YouTube channel in about 3 days. Here are the different ways that you can interact with the museum in addition to visiting our website. You can also see us on Facebook, Twitter, and at our YouTube channel. And as I mentioned earlier, on our YouTube channel, you can look for our new virtual museum tour. As I said earlier again, if you have any questions, feel free to call the museum at this number, or you can email us at questions@tmrmuseum.org. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at chairman@tmrmuseum.org. If you enjoy this program, please understand that we offer it to you and everyone else free of charge, but the museum does incur some cost in being able to make these presentations. And if you're so inclined, we would appreciate your donation. You can visit us at tmrmuseum.org/donate if you're so inclined. Tonight we present how to begin your patch trading hobby. And our presenter is Dr. Gene Berman. Gene Berman began his scouting career in the mid-1950s. He rose to the rank of Life Scout in his troop, missing Eagle by 1 merit badge. With over 25 years as Scoutmaster of several troops, he has always said not making Eagle was his one regret, and he has diligently worked to try to push those who have slowed down as they drove towards Eagle to finish and take the final step. Gene has had many accomplishments in his life. He recently retired as a doctor of dental surgery. He served as a dentist in the US Army, both stateside and in Vietnam. Gene is also the founder of the 10 Mile River Scout Museum. When Gene was stationed at Fort Rucker, Alabama in the late 1960s, he became Scoutmaster of Troop 49 there. Troop 49 at Fort Rucker had over 100 scouts and 10 patrols. Then he got orders to ship out over to Vietnam. While serving as a dentist there, he found time to volunteer with the Boy Scouts of Vietnam. While at Fort Rucker, Gene was asked to put together a display of Boy Scout patches from 550 councils from around the country. When it was time to take down the display, which was well received, no one else seemed interested in taking the patches, so Gene mailed them home to himself. Then again in Vietnam, he requested patches from councils around the USA to mount a display for the Vietnamese Boy Scouts. And again, when the display was done and no one else wanted the patches, Gene mailed them home. When he finally got home, he started learning about patch collecting, its facts, and its clubs, and became hooked for life. After Vietnam, Gene returned to Queens to start his own private dental practice and to continue to volunteer as Scoutmaster of Troops 109 and 199. His patch collection expanded. He authored a book on Siwonicki Lodge patches in 1991. His patch collection expanded. He also wrote many articles for various patch collecting journals and was one of the charter members of the board of directors of ISCA, the International Scouting Collectors Association, as well as the Scouting Collectors Society. ISCA formed in 2000, and Gene served on its board and as its director until 2015. Gene has one of the only complete collections of a name and number set of Order of the Arrow patches in the USA. Today, Gene serves as our chairman emeritus here at the TMR Scout Museum, but he is certainly not out to pasture, continuing to work on many museum projects. Gene has been together with his partner Patricia and her sons Chris and Brian for over 23 years. They are now proud grandparents. He says of the TMR Scout Museum that he used to feel like a parent and now feels like a grandparent that can do the projects without the agita. Gene has been awarded the Silver Beaver, the District Award of Merit, Friends of TMR Man of the Year Award, and has been inducted into the 10 Mile River Hall of Fame. He continues to serve as Troop 199 as the chartered organization representative. And Gene has also been a friend of mine since the early 1970s, and he's been a trusted advisor as I've taken the role of chairman of the 10 Mile River Scout Museum. So it's with great pleasure now that I turn the program over to a video that Gene recorded earlier of how to begin your patch trading hobby. Gene will be with us here live and in person to answer your patch trading questions at the end of the video.
While Michael's setting up, let me say by way of introduction that hobbies are something that most people have. Usually it's something connected to their lives, whether it's because they were baseball players as a kid in Little League and they collect baseball cards, or whether it's something that they collect because they did a lot of fishing with their granddad or something. Everybody seems to have their own hobbies that they like. Patch collecting, while not unique to scouting people, it's pretty much only scouting people, or mostly scouting people, that are interested in patch collecting. But it can be a lot of fun, because one of the biggest differences between patch collecting and some of the other more commercial ones, like coins and stamps, is when I was a kid, you could go through a roll of coins and find an Indian head penny or a Liberty quarter. You could find stamps in a whole pile of stamps that were good that you could set up in a book. Today, that good stuff has all been culled out. But in patch collecting, that's the unknown country. You can go, if somebody's got a shoebox somewhere that their grandfather saved patches when he went to the 1950 Jamboree, and among what we'll call the seashells, and among all of the shells, is that pearl. And that's the fun of the hunt. That's the fun of collecting. And lastly, before we're ready to start the show, let me say that there are all different levels of collecting patches, like there are all different levels of collecting everything. For the new person beginning, you're interested in collecting yours for mine, let's make a friend. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. You're not worried about, oh, this one's more valuable than mine, is less valuable. For the more advanced collector, then it starts to factor in, as to finishing off a collection, as to you get into more advanced and more mature stuff, especially as you go from young scout to teenager to adult. Michael, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready, Gene. I got the first, the intro slide up. I can go to the first slide when you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay, you can turn your camera off.
You mean people don't want to see me? Okay.
I don't want to see you.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. Done. Okay, there we go. Okay, patches come in many shapes and they come in many sizes. Some of the shapes are more popular and more common, and others less so. Arrowhead shaped patches seem to be very popular, and many patches are done in the shape of an arrowhead, as you can see on the top left. Round patches are also very popular, two different sizes to the right of that, one 4-inch, one 3-inch. The reason round patches are popular, and for that matter arrowhead too, is they can all fit on your right pocket in the temporary patch spot on the right pocket of your scout uniform. In patch collecting, there's nomenclature that we use, and we designate an arrow patch as an A. This is from OA Lodge 373. So this would be a Lodge 373A, and if it was the first patch made by that lodge, it would be A1. If it was the fourth patch made by the lodge, A4. The next two, we don't distinguish by size in the main description. We distinguish that in the to the right as far as comments. That would be called Rs. So you would have Susquehannock's Lodge 11, and you would have Lodge 11R, whatever that particular lodge might be. Skipping to the right, all the way, you see a triangle. They're not so common. Triangles, we get some, but not too many. So triangles, you would designate a triangle, we would, in patch collecting, as an X, along with many other weird shapes that we would call X's also. Sort of a catch-all collection category that doesn't deal with the main categories. Down below to the left is a back patch or a jacket patch from the 50th anniversary of 10 Mile River, and that would get the designation of a J. So that would be J, and then whatever that particular variety of 10 Mile River was, whatever issue for a back patch. There were 3 of them that year. I don't know what order they were issued in, but we'll just say for arbitrary, we'll call it J2. It may not be a jacket patch. Going to skip the owl for a minute. I'm going to move over to the right-hand side where you see 2 different flaps from Siwonicki Lodge. And those are 2 different issues that they're both called flaps. The one on the bottom is called a solid, but that's just short for solid embroidered flap. The top one just gets the F or flap designation, and I'm going to go into a little more detail on another slide. The reason I held the owl for last, it's obviously an X. It's not a unique shape that is often found in patch collecting. But again, that's your pearl on that page, because most of the other items on that page would have a value of maybe $10 or less. It's still unclear from which lodge that owl came. It either came from 110 or 122. If it could ever be verified as a 122, you're looking at a patch well into 5 figures, probably 20K or more. If it's from 110, still a good patch, and it's in 3 figures, no doubt. It's a good patch, but it would have an X. So that owl, will call it 110X, and then whatever the number. Let's say it was the first one, X1. Next slide, please. Okay, materials are different patches. Today, most of the patches are made of cotton and embroidery, but different patches are made in different ways. Top left is what we call a chenille. It's like a 3-dimensional patch, and the feel of it is like hook stitches, like a terry cloth bathrobe. Very few chenilles are made in an order. They're made one at a time, and they're custom made. So most chenilles tend to have a pretty good value to them dollar-wise, because there's just not that many made. This particular chenille is from Lodge 6 in Pennsylvania. Below that are 2 patches that are made of canvas. They're silk screen. Silk screen is paint that is placed on a cutout screen on a piece of material, and like you might do one of your shirts, the shirts that are screened with designs, whether it's, I know tonight's baseball, whether it be the Yankees or the Mets, maybe you have a Yankee or a Mets shirt on, for example. The one on the bottom, very inexpensively made, no edging. You can see it's a rough edge, very fine edge that it's cut out. It's neatly cut out on the middle one. Moving to the middle column, both the top and the bottom are what we call woven patches. They're actually woven on a very fine weaving machine. If you held them, they would have a silky feel to them. Once again, the bottom patch from a 1959 GNYC Camporee has no edging, and a better patch, the Scout Fair, they put a border on around it. It's a better quality patch. The people that ordered it, of course, paid a little more. Whitewater Valley's out in Indiana. To the extreme right, you have a typical patch that is made today, which is made from cotton, and it's got a border on it. And as I said, we're going to talk a little more about that afterward. But below it is also a patch that is made of cotton. And the big difference is we could call the very top one a solid. And again, I'm going to explain it coming up. And the middle one we will call a twill. Can't call it a flap because it's not a flap. It's a round patch, but it's got a twill base. The very bottom one is felt. In the early days of scouting, most patches were made of felt, but they didn't hold up very well. Beautiful screens, nice appearance, couple of washes, and they're shreds or faded. So not too many people were wanting to buy felt patches when better ways of making them came along. Next, please. Okay. What you see here are what are called CSPs, or council shoulder patches, made for wear on the top left shoulder of your uniform shirt against the seam with your unit numbers below. I'm not going to go forward in the slides because I'll get mixed up, but I'll just basically say that when scouting started, there were no council shoulder patches and there were no community strips. If you were Troop 1, you were Troop 1, and if you were Troop 12, you were Troop 12. But scouting grew too fast, and it got confusing because we'll say in Queens, where I live, if you were Troop 1 College Point, or Troop 1 Flushing, or Troop 1 Jamaica, or Troop 1 from some other part, it was confusing. So in the mid-20s, they started making community strips. I think the first ones actually came out around 1928 that identified your community. It was just a lettered strip matching your uniform. If you were in the Scouts, it was khaki and red, and it matched the color of your uniform. And it might have said on it, Kew Gardens, and then under that, it would have had the possibly the state, sometimes not, and then the troop numerals. Well, scouting grew and grew and grew. And all of a sudden, you had to cover every little community with 6 different colors, because you had 2 for Sea Scouts and 1 for different color for Air Scouts, blue on blue. The Sea Scouts had a summer and a winter uniform, blue and white and blue. You had the Cub Scouts, you had the Explorers eventually, you had the Boy Scouts themselves, and it was decided this was not tenable. So around 1952, they came up with the idea they're going to make it all one universal color, red and white. And the community strips were still going to exist, but other than the Sea Scouts that got a pass and continued to use their colors, all the other divisions now were using a community strip of red and white, which you'll see in a little bit. But this slide came first, so we'll talk about this. Well, time went on, and around 1968 or 69, it was decided that there were too many red and white community strips, thousands of them, because there were thousands of communities that had ordered these, and it was decided this doesn't make any sense either. Plus, the numbers in scouting wasn't quite what they were in the 50s and 60s. So a national letter was sent to 550 councils with 3 different designs. Top left, Circle 10, below it, Paul Bunyan, below it, Columbiana Johnny Appleseed. Whereas all these are legitimate council names, none of these patches ever existed for their councils. These were called national samples. Circle 10 is a real council to this day in Dallas, Texas, but Circle 10 Dallas never made that patch. National Supply did. Paul Bunyan was a real council, but it had gone defunct. It was emerged and gone when this was made in 1969 and issued in 1970. And there was a Columbiana Council and a Johnny Appleseed Council, both in Ohio, but there was no Columbiana-Johnny Appleseed. All three different shapes, if you notice. And the national letter said, you have to switch over to each council, 550 councils, you have to switch over from your red and white community strips to one of these approved shapes. Pick it, take your choice, design your own, but it's got to be one of these. But you don't have to do it until you run out of your supply of red and whites. So the very first ones of these started showing up around 1970 and thereabouts. And the very last one was Greenwich, Connecticut in 1985, the last holdout with red and whites that went to a community strip. To the right of Circle 10, you'll see San Mateo. That San Mateo Council chose the Circle 10 design. South Florida chose the Paul Bunyan design. Lone Tree chose the Columbiana Johnny Appleseed design. Flint River decided they were going to be renegades. They were going to be rebels. They were going to do what they were going to do. And that's, I believe, where Jimmy Carter lives in southwest Georgia. They chose their own council shape, and I don't know how long they were able to use it before National became aware of it and made them convert to one of the regular shapes. And then you can just see two patches that I made, not Scout patches, although they look like them because there are no official BSA logos. I made one for my godson, Damian Fredo, when he made his Eagle Scout back around, gee, I'd have to remember the year, but I'm going to say about 1993. And then to the right is a very interesting story about Meshuggah County Council. For those that are not aware, Meshuggah is a Yiddish word. It means crazy or crazy county council. And I'm going to tell you at the end of the slide presentation, there's another slide with one of these, how that came to be. So by 1970, everyone was told, change your red and whites and get your new patches. Next slide, please. Okay. These are just some differences in different kinds of patches. All right, first we're going to talk about the difference between, I said before, a twill and a solid. On the top left, the Mincy patch is what we call a twill. What that means is the background is a bolt of material, bolt of cloth, like you might have on your tent or you might have on a jacket. It's just a piece of cloth, and that an embroidery machine embroiders the design you choose into the patch. In a minute, we're going to talk about cut edges, and that would have a cut edge, which means that the red border around it is also embroidered at the same time that all the other embroidery is put on that patch. So that's a twill background because you can see the base material, the white cotton. To the right of that, that is called a solid or solid embroidered flap. In a solid, every millimeter, every square millimeter of the base material is covered with embroidery stitching. That may have a white background the same. It might have a white base. It might have a green base. It might have a purple base. But you can't tell because every stitch, every part of it is covered over with the green stitching. And on top of that green stitching then is your design. And that's also a cut edge, but it's placed on the design over the solid embroidery. Moving down to the next set, to the middle row, those are rolled edges. What a rolled edge is, it's a different process. A rolled edge is you finish the patch, let's say like the Mincy on top left, with no border. And then the no border patch goes to a different department at the patch manufacturer called the merrowing department to go on what's called a merrowing machine. And those are called merrow borders. I don't know how they got the name, but I'm guessing Mr. Merrow invented it, but don't quote me on it. That's called merrowing. And we call it more commonly a rolled edge. Makes more sense. It's a nice, better looking edge. It looks more finished. It looks more refined. It's a little more expensive. So where budgetary concerns are concerned, they may do cut edges. The older patches all seem to have cut edges. They weren't doing that much merrowing at the time. So that Tonkawampus, the middle one, that's a twill background. It's a blue twill with the embroidery on it, but then a rolled red edge was put on a merrowing machine. And on the right, Naradikang out of Edison, New Jersey, Thomas Edison Council, which no longer exists. That's a solid embroidered. Just a little bit of trivia. That is the only patch in all of the order of the arrow to choose a totem of a mosquito. So if you're watching and you were in Lodge 9, the Radicon, that is unique to you, a mosquito. Okay, going to the very back, to the bottom, both of those are Siwonicki patches, and you probably from the front could not tell the difference. However, in the back, the one on the right, the one on the right is a cloth back. It's got gauze or a very fine cheeseclothy backing. The one on the left has a plastic backing. It's plasticized. By looking at it or touching it, you could tell it's plastic. Why? Well, when these patches are made, they're very limp and they don't look good and they don't hold well. You want a nice, solid, stiff patch. And when you go and trade for a patch, you're looking for a mint, pristine patch that has some body to it, some substance to it, like people that use conditioner for their hair that want to give it body. The manufacturers wanted to give these patches some body. Notice that it looks the same, but the difference is that the government got involved in the early 70s, and OSHA said, you can't keep doing this with the cloth backs because the chemicals that are needed to fix the cloth back and stiffen or starch the patch are unhealthy. They're dangerous or unhealthy to the workers. So immediately there was a scramble to find a better way to do it. And pretty much today, just about every patch you get from just about everywhere will have a plastic backing. Next, please. Okay. On the right, these are the red and white examples of the red and whites we talked about before. After it became too cumbersome to make the strips in the colors of the uniform, in other words, Explorer green and brown and Cub blue and yellow, and they went to the red and whites, this is what they looked like. Now, most little communities had a little community strip on top, on the shoulder, right against the seam in the left, and then their state was right under that. This is an example of a real town called Philadelphia, Texas, but it would be the same patch if it were Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Other councils decided that they were going to use a full strip itself. And the third one down is one of ours, New York City, Staten Island. And there were 6 of them, one for each of the 5 boroughs. And then there was one that had greater New York councils on it for the professional executives that worked in multi-boroughs. These are community strips. And they went on to various communities as each of our boroughs was considered a community. Sometimes the professionals in a council, like for example, in Southwest Florida Council, the community strip might be Naples, Florida, or Fort Myers, Florida, but the executives, instead of Greater New York councils, would have Southwest Florida, the council patch, and South Florida would have Miami, which would be one of its cities, or it might have one of the other cities that are along the coast. And it could be just one like North Miami or anything in Dade County there. But the executives would have worn one that had the council name on it because they worked in multiple councils at multiple times. And on the left side, these are Siwonicki Lodge issues. We call them issues because they are different. They are, by design, they are meant to be different. And they were made at different times, designed, I assume, by different scouts that were in Siwonicki Lodge. Sometimes a flap is used for a very long time, and sometimes for a very short time. The top one that you're looking at was used for a decade. The original ones came out around 61, and then they were gone around 69. Same patch. There were a lot of varieties that every time they reordered, they were a little different. And some people will talk about varieties coming up. But these are issues because they were intentional design changes. 2 down from that in 1970 was an anniversary for Siwonicki Lodge. And they put out a 1-year patch, which actually was out for 69 and 70. It was out for 2 years. But it was the anniversary patch, and those that got into the OA or wanted to change put that on their uniform and took off the one on top. 1971 was the second one down, and although the intent was good, our friendship behind a running deer, there was a lot of unhappiness. First of all, Siwonicki's totem is a stag head, not a running deer. And then secondly, there was all kinds of nasty comments about what the head of that deer looked like, anything from a prehistoric raptor. Well, I don't want to get into it, but if you look at the top one, a much better looking head on the deer. So that one only lasted 1 year in 1971. 1972, they said, let's go back to our real totem, and that's the stag head from Siwonicki Lodge. But somebody in the office said, we could save some money. We don't need to spend all that money. So not only did they make it out of twill instead of solid embroidery, but they made it out of a very, very cheap twill, and they just didn't hold up. They just fell apart after the first washing. So what they did was they said, well, we love the design, we hate the patch. So after a year or two, I think it was 2 years, they used this. I think they used it 73 and 70. I guess it would have been 72 and 73. They said, we'll keep the patch, but let's go to a nice, solid embroidered patch. And if you remember back from one of the previous slides, we don't have to go back. The red patch, very nice patch. That was the solution, and that was used from 74, I guess it would be, through 79. Next, please. These are called region patches. When scouting first started, you didn't need regions because there weren't that many scout units and there wasn't that much administration. But as time went on, and it wasn't that much time, maybe a decade or so, it was determined that there had to be localized administration. So 12 regions were created, very much matching the U.S. Army commands. First Army area is New England, Second Army area was New York, New Jersey area, and so on and so forth. And on some of them, you could tell Region 1, top left, it shows the states, all the New England states. Our region was Region 2 with the Statue of Liberty. That patch has New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, which would certainly confuse some people saying, wait a minute, why is Region 2 getting Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands? The reason is that even though they would normally go with Florida probably, that the APO and the FPO boxes through which all the business transacted was in New York. So Region 2 was awarded tongue-in-cheek Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, as well as its original New York and New Jersey. Region 3 doesn't have its states, but it's the middle Atlantic states. Region 3 is Delmarva, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. Region 4, you can see the map again. It's got Ohio on it. It's got Kentucky. That's Region 4. 5 doesn't have its states, but that's Tennessee, Alabama, Louisiana, that general area. Region 6 is the, you can see the map. It's the East Coast, South Florida. It's Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas. Region 7, you can see on the map, has Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. Great Central West is the area around Kansas, Nebraska, that general area. Region 9 is basically Texas, Oklahoma. I think it might have covered New Mexico also, I believe. Region 10 was up on the northern end, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana. Region 11 was West Coast, Northwest, and that covered Oregon, Washington, Idaho. And Region 12 was California, Nevada, and Arizona. And the 12 regions lasted until 1973 when there was a consolidation, and then it was reduced to only 6 regions. Next slide, please. Okay, we were originally part of Region 2. Now we became combined with Region 1 below it to form the Northeast region, which we remain to this very day. And the bottom right patch is just a Northeast Roundup Award to show that there were regional patches for those that decided they wanted to collect regions. Today, the 6 regions have been reduced to only 4 regions, and those 4 regions don't even operate out of their territorial area. They operate out of the national office in Irving, Texas, and the Northeast region remains. There's a southern region, or south region, or southern region, I should say. There's a western region, and there's a central region. Next, please. Jamborees are a real lot of fun to collect, especially if you've been to a jamboree. And there have been jamborees going on for many years. The first jamboree was a disaster. It was meant to be in 1935. I don't have a patch of that up on this display, but just a few weeks before the jamboree, there was a polio outbreak and the jamboree was canceled. But all the patches had been distributed, the neckerchiefs had been distributed and given out, and they are a valuable collector's item today. A 1935 jamboree patch which is felt in pristine condition, no moth holes or anything, sells over $100. And the neckerchiefs, there were two of them. I think one was from in camp and one out of camp, a red one and a blue one. Again, in mint pristine condition, would probably sell a little bit over $100. Then in 1937, they actually got it off the ground in Washington. They ran the first jamboree in Washington in 37. And the patches are different because the 35 have the Capitol on them. The 37s have the Washington Monument, but they are also quite valuable in the same sense. The leader neckerchiefs probably sell for $200 a piece in mint condition. And the very valuable one is a purple neckerchief with an orange silk screen, which is the National Committee neckerchiefs, which approach 4 figures. However, as they got to the next jamboree, it was World War II, so that was postponed. And the next jamboree, you can see in the bottom center, the 1950 National Jamboree, and that's one of the patches. There was a silk patch. To the left of that is the 53 held at the Irvine Ranch, now the city of Irvine. There's one in the top right, middle right from 1964, and there's one bottom right from 1973. The uniqueness of 1973 was they held two of them. One was out in Farragut State Park in Idaho. The other one was in Butler, Pennsylvania, in Moraine State Park in Butler, and they tried an experiment. It was a disaster in '73. That's not for this webinar, but just briefly, for the first time, instead of taking honor scouts that had to be first class that had to apply, they let home units go, and it didn't work out real well. We can talk about that another day. The 50th anniversary in 1960, they wanted to celebrate, and they put out a back patch, not shown, a leather patch, not shown, and you see 4 up there. The 2 that are not shown say Philmont, for those that attended a class in Philmont, and Schiff, which was in Mendham, New Jersey, that attended also training at Schiff Reservation. The Schiff and Philmont patches are worth probably about $100 a piece. The back patch from the 60th anniversary, for the 50th anniversary, probably, maybe $10 to $15. The ones that are up there are not worth all that much because they made thousands of them. And we'll talk later if somebody asks a question even about what makes a patch valuable, but supply and demand's part of it. There's more to it. But you can see that for the 50th anniversary, the national office said, look, 40,000 people are going to come to the Jamboree. What about the other 3 million that are in the Boy Scouts of America? We got to do something for them. So for the Boy Scouts, there was a Jubilee Camporee on the extreme right. Those that attended the National Jamboree to the left of it. Those that wanted to participate in a citywide or by communities, they had Jubilee Field Day, and there was a Jubilee Cub Scout also that you can see over there. Again, many Jamboree patches and neckerchiefs, just a sampling so you can see what they look like. Next, please. Okay, here's an example of Canalino Lodge number 90. Arrowhead, I don't know if it's the first, let's make believe it is. We would label that as Lodge 90A1. It's an Arrowhead, Lodge 90, first issue, if it was. Anything unique about that? Well, the only thing that's unique about it, in my collection, I had a complete name and number set, which means every lodge that's ever issued a flap or a patch if they didn't issue a flap, and sometimes multiple numbers where 2 lodges will take the same number at different times during the existence of the Boy Scouts of America. When I was down to one, only one, I needed one number. It was Lodge 90. Not this patch, but it was the 90 S1 flap. The only way a brother could get that out of Santa Barbara, California, around Vandenberg Air Force Base, they had to join the lodge. They had to go through the lodge's ordeal. Now they were brother. Did they get a flap? Oh no. They had to make brotherhood. Then they got one. And then they had to sign a document that if they ever left the lodge, they would return the flap to the lodge. Nobody ever did, but they did have to sign that document. That was the last number I needed. Thank you, Dean Klinger from California, who was in the lodge, who got it for me in 1979 on a trip that I was out west with Frank Rickenbaugh. So thank you for that. But when you did make ordeal, you got the Arrowhead patch. They were easy to come by. And then there's just some different examples of activity patches. Coastal Empire had a camp patch. Camp patch collecting is a lot of fun. Good friends Dave Minahan in California and Bob Sherman up in Connecticut wrote a beautiful book about all the different camps and the patches that they made. And some people may want to collect different camp patches, although you can collect hundreds of patches just from 10 Mile River itself or from Greater New York councils, but you can collect one from each council too. The Stiford district in Brooklyn had a wintery and they made a patch. I believe it looks like a neckerchief patch. Then there was an OA bivouac, don't know where it was from. 25th anniversary of 10 Mile River in 1952, another activity patch, camp patch, a fall camporee from the Gulf Coast Council. And to the right is an OA patch from Shashuga Lodge 24 that was held at Alpine Scout Camp. It's an OA patch, it's a Shashuga patch, it's an R, but it's an activity patch, not an official issue. It's an official issue, but I mean, it's not considered a regular issue, I should have said. Next, please. Insignia. Insignia is a little different animal. Insignia, you mostly have to earn or you have to achieve to get insignia. And some of the insignia is the most valuable of all the collecting because, for example, there's one or two patches that came out as soon as scouting started, maybe in 1911 or 12, and by 1913 the patch was gone. That particular merit badge was gone, or they came out with a new merit badge in its place. And very rarely can one like that sell, but where they made 70 of them in 1913, you're talking about 5 figures and high 5 figures. I don't think you get to 6 figures, but you get into 5 figures quite a bit. These are 2 merit badges from my era when I was a scout. They're either the 50s or early 60s. One is from Citizenship in the Home, one's reading, then my patrol leader badge, and then a more modern patrol leader badge under it, and then I believe that's I think it's an assistant senior patrol leader patch, correct? I could be wrong. To the right is a scout lifeguard that had to be achieved. Those are patrol emblems. Some people collect patrol emblems. Some collect all of them. The old-fashioned red and black ones like that. Some collect the more modern ones. A JASM patch underneath. And also some foreign, up in top right, I'm sorry, the triangle is from one of the garrison caps. Those are the caps that fold flat. And 14 is just a numeral from a troop. Now you've got 4 patches down in the right. To the left of the end column, that's Boy Scouts of Canada. Got that when I went to Expo 67 in 1967. And the one below it, when I was coming back from Vietnam, I got that's Boy Scouts of Japan. I was never a member of the Boy Scouts of Japan or did anything with them, but I was able to get off the base and get to Tachikawa where the offices were, and I was able to get a strip Boy Scouts of Japan. Au contraire, on the right are 2, those are my patches. When I was in Vietnam, I was stationed in the city of Da Nang, second biggest city in South Vietnam, and the bottom patch is the Da Nang official, I guess it would be the same as the community strip. The Hang Dao Vietnam is the same as you would have Boy Scouts of America, Hang Dao meaning Boy Scouts Vietnam. Those were mine, and that's what I wore when I was giving volunteer service. Next, please. Okay. Mentioned varieties and issues before. The bottom patch, that's a keyhole, is an issue. The 3 ovals altogether, they are an issue. Design difference by intention, completely different. What about a variety? Varieties can be intentional, but usually are unintentional. And when they're intentional, it's because they didn't like a particular thing on the first run. So they will tell the manufacturer when they reorder the particular council or lodge, make this darker or make this lighter or change this little bit from this to that. Or sometimes the patch manufacturers screw up. In the case of these ovals, that's what happened. The patch manufacturers screwed up. Can any of you see, before I tell you the answer, why they're varieties? Well, I'll tell you because we don't have that much time. Look at the stones. Top left, blue, green, gray. Look at the next one, green, gray, blue. Look at the next one, gray, blue, green. All different. Patch manufacturer did not know what order they were supposed to be in, so they just made a third of each of the varieties. Those are varieties as opposed to issues. Next, please. Okay. But people that collect patches, sometimes they like to get their unit to approve and make their own neckerchiefs or their own patches for their own purposes. And as long as it's done in coordination with all the things that the Boy Scouts require, there's no problem. We'll take the top left is the, from when I was Scoutmaster of Troop 109, that was our 109 neckerchief. And to the right of that middle was our Troop Honor Patch. We set, Scouts set our own requirements, and Scouts had to meet those requirements to earn an honor patch. There were attendance requirements and advancement requirements and service requirements and leadership requirements. And it was not something that was impossible to get, but it wasn't something that you could get just 1, 2, 3. It usually took a couple of years. On top of that is the all-weather camper from 199, my original Queen's Troop, and my current Queen's Troop. That was tough. That was a tough thing to get. And in order to, and 199 is still active, and Scoutmaster Ronnie Abuha is still awarding these when people meet the requirements, but they're tough. You have to, for example, sleep in a tent in the snow. That's one of the requirements. Among perhaps 13 or 14 others, earn camping merit badge, the bunch. You could do the same thing. You could have your own honor patches, camping patches, or something, but once again, they have to be within the okay of your district. I guess it would be whether it would be your district advancement chairman or someone from the council. And just show on the bottom that when I was back then, you could get you could get the numerals together in one piece. They stopped making those also. They said, this is crazy. We're just going to make 1s and 9s and people can put them together. And in fact, we don't even have to make 1s and 9s because they can make 166 out of it. And then we made our own honor patch when I was Scoutmaster of 199 around 1991 for our 50th anniversary. 199 started in 1941. Next, please. Okay, this is the last slide, and and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about a few of these things quickly. On the top left, that is a pie patch. We call it a P for a pie-shaped patch. Looks like a wedge of pie. These were made on the neckerchief and off the neckerchief. Everyone can realize how it could go on the neckerchief because it matches the corner and then the rounded top, but it could also be used as a jacket patch. So this one was sold both ways. Below it is a postcard. I personally don't collect paper. I used to joke around and say I'm a dentist, but I'm a man of the cloth when it comes to patch collecting, not a man of the paper. But there are people that collect postcards and have fabulous postcard collections. I see some of them, and the scenes are gorgeous, old TMR scenes and things. John Dowd is one of the premier collectors for those of you that know John. Anyway, fabulous collection. To the right of that on the bottom is a service patch from Georgia. This is from one of the bowls. I don't know if it's the Peach Bowl or whatever bowl it is. The Scouts in the council were asked to give service as ushers. And those Scouts that served were awarded a football-shaped usher's patch. I guess they wore it on their right pocket as a temporary shirt. Okay. We Winoma 272 is just an example of a flap, and I honestly don't know why I put it there. I don't think there's any purpose to it, but let me cover these other two. The top right is absolutely not politically correct today. It was not politically correct back when it was made, I guess in the 80s. In the 80s, there were people that were very much against women in the OA. I always fought with them because those of you that know me know how hard I fought to get women and girls into scouting. Because of my own granddaughters, I wanted to get them into scouting, and I wanted scouting to realize that's the secret to membership is family camping. So I fought with them all the time. But there were people that were stodgy, and they made their own flaps, some of them, and no way co-ed OA Lodge, and they put down, I guess, what would be a feminine statistics, 36, 24, 36. And I guess that was their attempt at humor. As I said, today it would be very improper and very politically incorrect. Back then it wasn't so funny either, in my opinion. But I mean, again, I have a sense of humor, so I didn't get crazy about it. And last but not least on the slideshow is Meshuggah County Council. When the CSPs first came out, and OA as well, there were all different kinds of collectors. One of the things about collecting is that you should, in my opinion, have this mantra if you're going to collect patches, because it makes it unique and different from all other hobbies. Make a friend first, collect a patch second. So when you see someone and you can walk over to them and shake their hand, wait a minute, you don't shake their hands anymore. When you walk over to somebody and you can bump their elbow and say, hi, and my name is such and such, my name is Gene Berman, and your name is John Doe, and where you from, and what do you collect, and would you trade one of your patches for one of mine? And it's a very good way to make a friend, and it's a very good way to get a patch collecting hobby going. So there are people that are like that, and they are wonderful people in the hobby. However, there are also people that are counting pennies, counting dollars, counting coins, got cash registers between their ears. They only are interested in what can I get out of this? So the way I used to give out the Meshuggah County Council, remember it means Crazy County Council, is when somebody would sit with me for a little while and we chat about patches, we chat about scouting, didn't have to be for a long time, and very often we traded irregular patches, but at the end I say, and here's a little present from me, here's a Meshuggah County Council. Well, right away, Cash Register Joe would be over. I want one. How do I get one? What do I have to give you? How much do I have to give you? I said, they're not for sale. I said, and then of course, eventually word got around. And of course, even people that weren't happy grudgingly came over, and I would give them one eventually if they went through the protocol. But then can I get a second one? I'll give you $25 for a second one. No price. You cannot get a second one. It's a friendship gift. And that was my own little wacky idea as to how I had fun collecting patches. It was made in the late 1970s. And that pretty much ends the slideshow. So I apologize for the technical difficulties, but now I guess we can go to whatever we're going to go to by our organizers.
Well, now is question and answer time, and you could turn your camera on now. And
wait a minute. All right, wait a minute. I just did something wrong. Hold on. Okay, how's this?
No problem.
When I hit my camera, I get webcam preview, share my webcam. That's what I want. I got it. Okay.
See, you're a big boy. You could figure it out. There you go.
I did. I may not know anything about technology. I may know a few things about patches. All right, now how do I get rid of I got me. Now how do I get rid of the thing that says stop my webcam?
We don't see it, so don't worry about it.
Okay, there you go. Oh, wait a minute. What did I just do?
You're fine, Gene. Don't worry. You just
It's
fine.
okay. It's okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
And that's Mitchell's voice that we hear. Mitchell, you want to do the questions?
I would love to. So we have a question from a scouter who is asking, what is the best way to store your patches to keep them in good shape and retain their value?
All right, that's a personal choice that people have to make. My recommendation for your regular main collection would be in archival plastic sheeting. There's cheap things that you can get that are acetate. The problem is the acetate against the patch can very well suck out some of the color and devalue the patch. But there are what they call archival plastic sheets. And then the plastic sheets, whether they're stored in loose leaf books or whether they're stored in containers or boxes, that would be one way. My main collection is in frames. I have, it's 20 frames, two side 40 frames that are 3 feet by 4 feet, and they're on like a swing, I don't know what you would call it, but but if you've ever seen patches, if you've ever seen posters in a store where you can swing through the different posters, one of those things, but it's much bigger, and they're under glass, or plexiglass actually. So that's another way to store them. They can also be stored in individual envelopes, once again archival, and then those individual envelopes can be stored in boxes or file cabinets or something like that. For your this is all for your permanent collection that you're not going to be going in and out, in and out, in and out. Okay.
Sounds great, Gene. Next question, and if you don't know the answer, Michael or I can, because this might be a little trickier.
Before you ask my question, can people see me? Because all I can see is myself. What am I doing, or what am I not doing? Should I be pressing all, or talking, or none? Can I press all? Would that work?
No, Gene, you're fine. You don't have to do anything.
Gene,
You're
just it's okay.
All right.
All right. So, Gene, whose
Yes.
blanket is that we're looking at in the picture right now?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to it,
And the
but
actual answer
can I answer?
is it's actually Steve Harkavy's blanket that,
okay.
If you remember a couple of months ago when we were working on the patches with the museum committee up in the Bronx, that was one of the blankets that was donated. And it's actually, some of you may remember the Harkavys, certainly Steve Harkavy, who is did a lot of stuff with the Kunitar and the Brooklyn Arrowhead and things, to the best of my knowledge. So on that note, the next question is, what is a traitory and how do I navigate a traitory so that I can get something nice and not break the bank?
Okay, a traitory is basically a flea market for patches. In a traitory, if somebody wants to run a traitory, basically what they do is about a year in advance, certainly no less than 6 months in advance, they decide who is going to be doing the sponsoring. Will it be an Order of the Arrow Lodge? Will it be a council? Will it just be a troop? Will it be some individuals? And then where are they going to hold this? You want to hold it in a place that people can get to. You want to hold it in a place that's that has parking. You want to hold it in a place that doesn't have lots and lots of steps to have to navigate because people bring in a lot of things to sell or to trade. So once that's done, then what you do is you make your arrangements. You arrange to have your facility. You get publicity by notifying local councils and by extending it. A little later, we'll talk about other places, how you can publicize it. But then you're ready to roll. So in terms of Kintakoying Lodge, under the great direction of Bill Mulrennan for the last number of years, he sets it up that his venue is going to be Alpine. It's set up a year in advance, that he has the date, that he can publicize it a year in advance, that people can mark it on their calendars. He lets people know how much, if they want to buy a table to use at the traitory, it's going to cost. Usually they run about $15 or $20 a table. And then people can lay out their wares for trade, for sale, whatever it is. And then there are other people that don't have that much stuff to lay out. They don't need a table. And they just can come and walk around the traitory and look and see what interests them. In terms of navigating the traitory, the old adage, knowledge is power, takes place there, because how do you look at two patches and know this one's valuable and this is not? I want to get into that once you get through some of the other questions about how the criteria is. Maybe let somebody ask it, so Mitchell will ask it to me, as to how you know what to look for in criteria. But by somebody who doesn't know, looking at two patches, you're probably not going to know. So what you got to do in navigating a traitory is you've got to be looking around and learning. And the more you learn, the more you know. But before you do anything at a traitory, you just, in terms of actual physical doing and not just looking, decide what you want to collect. There's so many things to collect. It'll drive you crazy. If you're going to collect camp and you're going to collect Alpine Pouch and TMR, don't be looking to collect OA. If you want to collect CSPs, don't be looking to collect camper reenactivity. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's the best way. That's how a traitory is organized, and that's how. And in terms of how you find out about a traitory, like I said, I've got two more things that I wanted to add. Maybe I should have added them before we started the questions, but it's going to explain a website and about how you can get some ideas about where traitories are being held.
Thanks, Gene. Those were great answers. And before we get to the next question or two, and we have a few, which certainly actually talk about the things that you just saying you're going to add. Somebody was nice enough to point out, looking at the patch blanket, that If you look, you'll see on the right-hand side, Troop 442. That was actually Carl Bernstein's troop and Larry Lachey's troop. So it's good to have them with us spiritually on the webinar. And next couple of questions then, Gene, which
All right.
actually were.
Do you want me to take care of the two things I said I wanted to? Because that's going to maybe answer.
I'll ask basically, here's what the questions are directly, but you kind of talked about it a little bit. What criteria determine what makes a patch valuable? And then
That's
the
a
other
good
thing that
question.
you mentioned, what is a good resource, book, website to use as a starting point for someone who's new to this collection hobby?
Perfect. Okay, let's first talk about what makes a patch valuable. Well, like any collectible, supply and demand always come into it. But in patch collecting, there are 4 criteria: supply, demand, catalogability, and catalogability and hype. Those are the 4 things. Let me explain. In terms of supply and demand, they are not equal. Not equal. Demand is the much more important thing, because when you have a limited supply, if there's no demand, there's no interest, there's no value. If you have a great supply, once again, not likely to be much value. But if there's a demand, then it changes the criteria, because now all of a sudden people are looking for that particular item because you have the demand. I'm not saying supply is not important. It's a criteria, but not as important as demand. Catalogability, number 3, means that you can find a checkoff list, you can find a book. People like to collect blocks. They want to collect all the patches from their lodge. They want to collect all the patches from Camp Pouch. They want to collect all the items that have a listing that you can have a checkoff box, and you needed 50 of them, and then you get 10 of them. The next Traitory, you get 5 more, and eventually you need 3 of them, and maybe you can complete a collection of something. If it's in a book and you can check it off, it's cataloged. It enhances the value tremendously. For those items that have no checkoff lists because they don't exist, for example, Klondike Derbies and Camporees, too many of them, too many districts issuing too many patches for too many years that nobody's kept track of. There is no catalogability. Doesn't mean you can't collect them, but they're not going to have a value. So you're going to find a patch that, for example, has a certain amount of, we'll say, a scarcity, we'll say, in the beginning, but the hype we want to talk about. So hype is, it gets a lot of publicity for one reason or another. When the first Jaws came out before the 81 Jamboree, everybody wanted a Malibu flat because it had Jaws on it. It was the most popular thing. The kids that were in Lodge 566 Malibu could go into their council office and buy them over the counter for a couple of bucks a piece. But they were getting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 patches for one because everyone wanted a Malibu. It was the hype. It wasn't the value. There were hundreds of them, thousands of them, but it was the hype. And so that's part of it too. Sometimes you have a supply. I've had people, I know we've got Shashuga people on here that want to know, why is my Arrowhead patch, which hasn't been made since 1958, why is it only worth maybe $10? It has no value beyond $10. And the reason is thousands of them made. How many scouts were in Brooklyn that got 2 or 3 patches a piece? Same with the Jamboree. Thousands and thousands are made. So even if 20% remain, there's many, many patches. But that's basically it. If you have a rare patch from the 30s, but there's no catalogability, like let's say a Camporee patch, it's going to have a little value, but not a lot of value, because it's something that they just made too many of, or it's a Camporee that you can't catalog. And lastly, to go back to supply and demand, think in terms of a Jamboree shoulder patch or a NOAC contingent patch. Before the NOAC or before the Jamboree, everybody wants to get this patch. Oh boy, this patch has Star Wars on it. This patch has some other modern, whatever it might be, on the patch. Everyone wants this patch. And then the Jamboree happens and everybody wants this patch. And then the Jamboree ends and a few people didn't get it yet. They're still looking for it. And the next thing you know, there's a NOAC coming and everyone wants the NOAC patch. everybody's kind of forgotten about that Jamboree patch. Supply's still there, but a patch that would sell prior to the Jamboree because it was hyped for $25, you can't get $5 for. So it's really demand. Okay, I hope that answers the question on how one gets to a value. Now, as far as places to look and things to do, I want to call your attention to a website, and I'm going to give you the URL, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. It's called ISCA, is the name of the organization. ISCA stands for International Scouting Collectors Association, and it's a national organization, and it's based out of part of it out of it's corporate. It's incorporated in Texas, and ISCA probably at the moment is the most valuable resource or asset you can get. I'm a little prejudiced because I was one of the founding members of the board of directors there. I served on it from 2000 when it was founded till 2015. There was a statement earlier that said I was the director, which is incorrect. I was a director, I was not the president or the chairman of ISCA, but a great organization that continues to exist today. To get to it, first of all, the URL is http:// it's Scout Trader, all one word, Scout, SCOUT, Trader, TRADER, that's double T. So http:// Scout Trader, SCOUTTRADER.org. If you went to that website, there is an amazing amount of stuff that's on that website for free. You can read about where Traitory, how a Traitory is run, where Traitories are being held, and a number of other things, all for free. In addition, if you really think you want to get into it, ISCA puts out a quarterly magazine of about 50 pages 4 times a year, and it's online for $10 a year. You get a full color magazine 4 times a year, and they talk about all the different facets of collecting, whether it's Order of the Arrow, whether it's CSPs, whether it's back in the day about how the original scouting merit badges came to be. How many of you are aware that in the early days, when you went for your ranks, when you made first class, your next rank was Life, then Star, then Eagle. Only, I guess, in the 20s did they reverse them where it became Star, Life, and Eagle. Learn about all the different things that are going on in the various modalities of trading, trading trends, trading hobbies, people that have organized traitories, people that run sales lists and sales companies. It's all in that magazine. It's $10 a year for an electronic copy, and it comes to you from the website, and it's good for 4 issues. There's also a hard copy for those of you that want to spend a little extra money. It's an additional $35, $45 in total, and they will mail you a hard copy of it. But you get everything on the website. You don't really need it. And if you think you may be interested, you'll see the covers of the magazines. They're very interesting for $10 a year. That should be a very good start. There are other websites, but there's a limit to how much we can do today. So let me leave it at that.
Great. That's really interesting, Gene. And our next question is from a longtime TMR Scout and Scouter. And it's an interesting question. Why do you make extra patches just to save money? And then are you limiting your profits in the long run?
I'm sorry, when you say, why do you make extra patches?
Yeah, for example, if you want to make a patch, would it be more valuable to make less of a run of patches? But
Gotcha.
We know that the patch makers will charge you if you do a run of 100 patches versus 200. Wouldn't the patch be more value in the long run if you only made 100 versus 300?
First of all, when we make patches, rarely, and I don't want to say not never, but rarely are we making patches with the intent to promote their value in terms of collecting. We're making the patches for a purpose, and we are making them to sell them, to raise money for TMR if it's a TMR item, or raise money for the museum, or raise money for your district, or FOS for the whatever it might be. So patches are generally not being made with a collecting community in mind. Having said that, sometimes we do specials that we make that are limited, and we tell the people they're going to be limited because that, of course, improves their collectability in terms of appreciation and value if only a limited number of them are going to be made. But the thing about making general patches is we got to go with the patch manufacturing. And here's a story that I'll tell you quickly where David Molaski, who does a great job on our historian patches each year, and I collaborated when I was still chairman on one of the patches, and we found out that the manufacturing company, believe it or not, was going to charge us less money to make 1,000 patches than to make 700 patches. As crazy as it sounds. The 700 would have cost us total conglomerate more than the 1,000 patches. So obviously, what did we do? We made the 1,000 patches. But again, it depends on when patches are being made. Generally, they're being made to what the maker is conceiving to be within the price break framework, what the demand is going to be for those patches. In other words, where are they going to be issued or given or sold or awarded? How are they going to come to be? Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And then the next question, I have started a number collection using Pocket Blue Book. Where can we get the current list of number patches?
Okay. Guess what? ISCA, scouttrader.org. They, I believe, provide a free list without having to join of, it's not a book, it's just a listing of the number of the patches, what is more modern. As far as the Blue Book, the Blue Book proper and the Blue Book Pocket Blue Book have been out of print since 2006. That's like 15 years already. They're out of print. Once again, I come back to ISCA because they are the central, they're the key. They are working on re-establishing Blue Book, and there are editors from the old regions. Bill Mulrennan, again, I mentioned him earlier, is the New York State editor, and I'm actually the New York City editor for Blue Book. But they're working to try to get a new Blue Book out. Don't ask me when. I have nothing to do with it, but they're trying to get a new book out. In the meantime, though, you can get an up-to-date list from the ISCA website, which lists all the numbers, and it lists the names, including the more recent mergers and more modern things. So if you know, I don't know when Pocket Blue Book was last published, but if you can see when it was last published, you probably can pick up the ISCA list from the next date up and pick up what you need. There have been other websites, but people run them. There was a great red and white website, but it's down. CSPs, there's a very good CSP book, but the last one was just put out a couple of years ago, and I don't know when the next one's going to be issued. But again, you can get that information from ISCA, and that's what I suggest.
Great. I think the next two questions are kind of interesting, but we'll start just with the first one. As some patches are very valuable, is there a problem with counterfeits?
Good question. Good question. Anything that can be made can be counterfeited. Can it be counterfeited well? Well, I don't know. I mean, you have to ask people that have counterfeited money. If they got caught, I guess they didn't do very well. But the answer is, once again, I come back to that old axiom of knowledge is power. And the answer to your question is yes. And obviously, a patch that is of very little value, dollar-wise, is far less likely to be counterfeited. For example, last year's Camporee patch from your district, I doubt if anyone would counterfeit, because to what end, to what purpose? But more valuable patches are counterfeited, and usually I'm going to put this in quotation marks, the powers that be or the experts that know this stuff, whether it's Insignia, whether it's Order of the Arrow, whether it's Council's Shoulder, or anything else, Jamboree, know how to tell the difference between real and fake. And usually, as soon as they know, they put it out into whatever publications are available to spread the word around. Doesn't mean someone that doesn't belong to any kind of a grouping would know it. Some of the fakes are very bad, and you can look at it, and you can look right at it and know right away it's a fake, as long as you knew the good one, what the real one looks like. In 1975, a man who's now deceased and sadly a professional named Marlon Bates faked about 13 or 14 different valuable Order of the Arrow flaps. They were good. They were really good. And in 1975, someone came to me at the Traitory before NOAC and said, I have in my hand, I think it was 14 Marlon Bates fakes of Order of the Arrow flaps. I also have 14 real ones. I'm going to mix them up. You're an expert. And I never claimed to be an expert. I have a little knowledge, but I never claimed to be an expert. How many of them are you going to get right? Well, law of averages said Gene Berman, expert, should have been able to get at least 2/3 right. I didn't even get 50% right. That's how good those fakes were. However, once I knew what the real one was, because I had never looked closely at my real ones that I had in my collection, because there was no reason to, because there was no fake. So there's no reason to look at every little stitch and remember it. But once I looked at large 454 Kamehameha from Hilo, Hawaii, you could see that on the helmet, there was a vertical stitch instead of a horizontal stitch on one or the other. I think the horizontal stitch was the real and the vertical stitch was the fake. And you could tell right away. Once I knew, but it's hard.
That's great, Gene. And this is going to be the last question, and then I'm going to turn it back to Michael to call it a wrap. And
before you wrap, let me take the question and let me make one final comment about eBay.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Let me take the question.
And I think this question is important, especially with youth protection and things. Can a scout, in other words, a youth, trade with a scouter, an adult?
That is a very good question, because originally there was never a problem with scouts trading with adults. However, on or about the 70s, getting close to 1981, I know for sure that there were some problems, and with adults ripping off youth, they said, and they passed a resolution at the 1981 National Jamboree that adults were forbidden from trading with youth. And they had actually, it was a laugh, they called them the patch police, police explorers riding around on bicycles looking for adults that were guilty, to give them tickets and to call the army in from the base from the Jamboree, that it wasn't supposed to be. And then that policy kind of translated for a number of years into everything, I would say through the mid 80s, maybe even late 80s, where adults and youth were not permitted to trade with each other. And it was a problem because the adults had the best patches, so the youth were not happy because they couldn't trade to get the best patches. And the adults were not happy because sometimes a youth had a patch that they really wanted. And I'll tell you the truth, I've been doing this for a day or two since my Army days in 1960s, and rarely, I mean, there are certainly some scum, is everything, and there is adults that certainly would do such, but it's very rare. Most adults will give a kid the benefit of the doubt and actually help the kid get started in patch trading to continue to perpetuate the hobby. But more likely that there's a 14-year-old trying to rip off a 12-year-old by saying, oh, my patch is so valuable. Oh, it's worth at least 3 of yours. And the 12-year-old is mesmerized. And pretty soon he started out with 12 patches. Now he only has 2 patches. So the answer is that as time evolved, and again, I would go back to my old friend Zisker at the NOACs. They serve as the monitoring agency for the National OA Committee. They monitor the recognized traitories after the shows and things at the NOACs. And again, their job is to settle disputes and monitor to make sure that nobody's getting ripped off or getting hurt. But because it was done very successfully, At later jamborees, the policy no longer is in effect that it's mandated that youth and adults cannot trade. Youth and adults, to answer your question, can trade as long as there's no local policy that whoever's running the Traitory, whoever's running the show, be it the executive of that council, whoever, or the whoever says you are not allowed in this particular event to trade adults and youth. Youth and adults are permitted to trade, but again, we say the same thing: make a friend, trade a patch second, and don't be mesmerized by what people tell you, because people don't always speak the truth. At the 2013 National Jamboree, may have been the same as 17, people that wanted, adults that wanted to trade with youth had to buy a license, which I did, had to be a registered member of the Boy Scouts of America with youth protection, which I did and I had. And then they give you a thing to wear around your neck that says you're okay to trade with youth, as compared to people that just wander onto the property and might want to do unscrupulous things. And what they're kind of worried about, especially with jamborees, is the bad publicity, because sometimes the kids get in such a frenzy that they just got to have this new Star Wars patch that you don't know what they're going to do, and you just don't want to take any chances. So basically, that was how the National Jamboree works. The NOAC works the way I said. It's monitored, but you can trade, and local events are at the discretion of the sponsoring group that now runs the activity as to whether youth and adults are permitted to trade with each other. I just wanted to get one last point in about eBay. I'm surprised nobody asked that question, is what about eBay for patches? And eBay is not for beginners. eBay is for window shopping for beginners. eBay is a good place to look around. First of all, every patch on eBay, even ones that were made last year, are vintage. The people put it up, they're rare, they're vintage. I look at these patches, I know they made thousands of them. They're rare and vintage. These were made 4 years ago. So you can't believe everything you read on eBay. But what it is good to do is to look at eBay in your particular category. There's a way to get there if anyone needs to get there and they can't negotiate it, they can't navigate it. If you email me, or if you email Michael, he'll get back to me on it as to how to get to scouting things in eBay. You got to go through a bunch of hoops. You got to go from ebay.com to collectibles to historical, to collectibles to historical to fraternal to there's something else after fraternal, and then you get Boy Scouts. It's about 4 or 5 hoops you got to jump through, and then you can get the Boy Scouts. But even in Boy Scouts, there are a lot of people that are not Boy Scouts selling things on eBay, and they're going to sell you their grandmother's old sack dress that she wore in the 1950s and tell you it was worn by Betsy Ross and it's rare and valuable. So you got to be very careful on eBay. Even eBay says caveat emptor, which is buyer beware. But the other thing on eBay is, if you're going to look, don't look at what people are asking. Look at prices realized, completed items. That'll tell you the price of what something is selling for, because people, I see them, they're worth $3, they're asking for $53. And sometimes they just don't know, and they're just fishing. And sometimes they're trying to catch somebody that has no idea. So eBay's good. And the only thing about it is, it's good to look at for the beginner. For the more experienced collector, buy, but buy with discretion. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Gene. That was terrific. And thanks for everybody who joined in. And Mitchell, do I have control again? I'm going to assume I do. I wanted to let everybody know that talking about patches, the museum, I said earlier, has a virtual tour, and scouts who do the virtual tour can earn the TMR Scout Museum Historian Patch. The museum also did a special issue this year to commemorate the first time 10 Mile River in its history was closed due to the pandemic. The No COVID back patch. This is a 6-inch patch, and you can purchase the patch at the museum store. I wanted to tell you that our next talk will be August 4th at 7 p.m. It'll be Knotweed, Tough Love. Knotweed is an invasive plant that has actually caused havoc in the United Kingdom. You can't get a mortgage on a property if there's even a shred of knotweed growing on the property. And here in the United States, it's just clogging our streams and waterways all across the country. So the National Park Service will have a representative who will be talking about the knotweed and tough love. And you can see our full schedule of all of our upcoming webinars on the museum's website, tmrmuseum.org. Lastly, I wanted to again say that if you enjoy these free talks and you feel so motivated to support them, please go to tmrmuseum.org/donate. And otherwise, you can interact with the museum on our website, our Facebook page, Twitter, and you can check out our YouTube channel for interesting videos that we have posted there. Thanks everybody for joining us, and I hope to see you all on August 4th for Knotweed Tough Love. Have a good night.